Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 7th of November of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk one more time about Zelensky and the things that he is currently doing in Kyiv, in Ukraine. And the most important update is that Zelensky introduced laws to parliament to extend martial law and mobilization for another 90 days. And this is very important because the next martial law will be finished on the 14th of February. And Zelensky terms, the president terms, will be finished on the 31st of March. So this is a very important thing that today the commission, Zelensky, the Ukraine Commission about elections, told us that when there is a martial law, there can be no elections of president in Ukraine. And that's mean no matter when the current president term finish, he will continue staying as a president during the war period of time, during martial law. And this is very important because this is something like a small trap for Zelensky. The thing is that obviously on the 14th or 15th of February, he's going to extend the martial law for another period of time. And on the February 14th for another 19 days, and the next martial law period will be finished in May. And basically in May of 2024, with the finish of the next martial law, Zelensky will automatically lose his position as a president. And now he needs to extend this martial law every single period of time before the end of martial law. And let's say if Ukraine parliament, let's say the next term martial law will be finished on the 10th of May. And if Ukrainian parliament will take a small pause for 1 day and will extend the next martial law not from the 10th of May, but let's say from the 11th of May, that means that during this 1 day, Zelensky will automatically lose his president chair. And this is very important, and this is the reason I told you that probably starting from February of 2024, the Ukrainians will try to extend martial law not for 90 days, but for a much longer period of time. Let's say for let's say for 200 days or 300 days, because it's too risky. It's too risky for him. And if the parliament starts strike, if the parliament can unite, they can push Zelensky far away from his president chair. Very interesting situation. We're gonna see probably a very big crisis in Ukraine, in Kyiv, in Ukraine parliament, and in relations between president, parliament, and probably the military authorities. Now let's move to Kherson direction. Today we got a lot of updates. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes, that as a result of bombardments of Kherson direction, the Ukrainians lost a significant number of soldiers, 55 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems, 1 Stab B and 1 Gvozdika. And a few days ago we were talking a lot about the armored vehicles, that Ukrainians started redeployment of their armored vehicles, light vehicles on the Russian bank of the river, but we still haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation. And today somewhere at 5 p.m. we got the first video from the Russian sources. On this video was geolocated. On this video we can see 2 armored vehicles that were abandoned or maybe destroyed on this road that goes from the river, from the residential area to the village by the name of Podstepne. And the Russian sources are saying that it's very difficult to understand, according at least to this video, whether those armored vehicles were abandoned by the Russians during the retreat process, or those were the Ukrainian armored vehicles that were abandoned by the Ukrainians after redeployment. Very difficult, but this is not the most important point. The Ukrainians are using these abandoned vehicles as the eye positions to control the situation, and there was a video to warn people to be careful with abandoned armored vehicles along the Dnipro River. Interesting updates are coming from Krynki, and on Krynki the Russian sources published the video of destroyed Humvee. This video, I put this video on map softly, but the only thing we know that authors are saying that this Humvee, or it's very difficult to recognize Humvee on this video obviously, but the author is saying that was Humvee that was abandoned and destroyed on the Russian side, on the Russian bank of Dnipro River. So this is the first cases, but as I understand there are going to be more cases. The Ukrainians are going to send more. Currently they have possibilities to redeploy just light vehicles like Humvees, like Kazakhs. Maybe later they will start redeploying tanks and maybe Bradleys and Strikers or something like this. Furthermore, we got another video from Kazachий Лагерь. On this video, we can see the usage of the Russian Lumur missile. Just a second, we're gonna see the explosion, and that's it. This is the explosion. A few seconds. And that's it. So there is like a smoke, fire, and the Russians, and according to the video, the Russians continue bombardment of this village with different types of weapon, which confirms the Ukrainian presence. The Ukrainians still have the presence in this area, and probably we can update the map because at least this part of Krinky is also under Ukrainian control. So the situation is getting more and more critical every day, but you know that other Russian sources are saying that this is not like the critical situation. This is completely controllable situation by the Russian forces. This is the tactic that the Russians use. The Russians know about the Ukrainian logistic problems, about the Ukrainian issues with redeployment of forces, about like difficulties that they face during this process, about significant losses, and all these bridgeheads were allowed by the Russians to be established by the Ukrainian forces, because of course we can compare the numbers, and we discussed this many times that if we compare the number of losses, the Ukrainians start losing much more forces after they created the foothold, before like this foothold. Also, the Russians published, it was probably a very like successful day for successful 24 hours for the Russian Lancet forces. On this video we can see how the Russians were using the Lancet of new generation with self-navigation system, and as a result of strike, the Ukrainians lost another radar, NTPQ-36, the radar of counter-artillery duels. Furthermore, the Ukrainians also published one video how they managed to discuss also the Russian radar Vasilek, and as a result of Ukrainian strike with FPV drone, not Lancet but just a regular FPV drone, the Russians also lost some equipment. So the clashes along the Dnipro River continues, and I believe that we're going to receive more and more updates from this territory. When talking about Zaporizhzhia direction, we also got a lot of updates from this area. The Ukrainian sources also published the video how they managed to discover the Russian air defense system Tor M1. They tried to hit and destroy the system with probably HIMARS strike, but the Ukrainians missed. But some parts, some things from that missile probably damaged that machine, and the Russians were forced to redeploy their air defense system from this area. The thing is that Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro area, Kryvyi Rog is the main area of operation of operating area of Ukrainian air forces, like Su-27, Su-25, Su-24. So that's why the Russians concentrated most of their air defense forces on the south of Energodar. And the Ukrainians, of course, they need to destroy Russian air defense if they want to continue bombing and attacking with missiles the cities like Berdyansk, Mariupol, Tokmak, Crimea, and so on. This is like the vital question for the Ukrainians to suppress Russian air defense exactly on the south of Energodar. When talking about Zaporizhzhia area, we got a lot of updates, and the most of them are coming from the western part of Robotyne. The Russians continue destroying Ukrainian armored vehicles, Ukrainian Bradleys, Leopard tanks, infantry. The Ukrainians continue sending more and more forces, stormtroopers, like special forces, to develop their foothold, to get closer to Kopony, and so there are very heavy clashes in this direction, but so without any progress for both sides. The Ukrainians managed to capture some tree line, and after that, as you can see, there is no progress anymore. The Russians destroyed few armored vehicles, the Russians destroyed few armored tanks, and like with FPV drones, with the types of weapon they have. On the west of Verbova, we also have a lot of updates. For example, on this video, we can see how the Ukrainians tried to complete the rotation process. The Ukrainian infantry was very in a hurry to enter the Bradley, and then they were trying to evacuate, but they couldn't evacuate because the Russians used like anti-tank missile, and Bradley was destroyed with the crew inside. Another video of we got from the same area, another Marder was destroyed as a result of anti-tank strike as well. So based on this video, based on these videos, we see that Ukrainians maybe try to concentrate on this screen. We see at least 4 armored vehicles. The Ukrainians tried to concentrate their forces on the western part of Verbova. Maybe they were planning to attack, but the Ukrainian plans were ruined at the beginning of the operation. So just at the very beginning, they lost up to 4 armored vehicles and were collapsed, and their operation failure. The Russian sources are saying that as a result of clashes on Zaporizhzhia direction, the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. From the other side, Ukrainians also published some videos of some preparations. They managed to discover and destroy a few Russian radar equipment, maybe electronic warfare equipment, and few artillery systems. But as we can see, those actions didn't help them to complete the battle for Verbo-Rabotina successfully. Now we're moving to the South Donetsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything from Vremivka tactical bridgehead, but we got a lot of updates from South Donetsk direction. And the most important, obviously, is another successful usage of Lancet drone in the area between Novoukrainovka and Prichistovka. On this video, we see how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian artillery position and to destroy it with old generation Lancet strike without self-navigation. Interesting updates are coming from the South Donetsk direction, from Ugledar area. The Russians, as you know, the Russians currently are trying to storm and trying to capture the 3 lines and Ukraine positions on the east of Ugledar, and currently the most fierce and the most bloody clashes are taking place exactly in this square. And according to at least many Russian reliable resources, the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukraine defense belt and basically to enter these fortification, to dig in deeper, and currently there are very heavy clashes in this area, and the Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to step back. And to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities, their reserves, reinforcements possibilities, the Russians during the day were bombing Ugledar and the villages around Ugledar heavily. In this video we see significant number of usage of different types of weapon against the city. The Russians were bombing this area with FAB-500s, with multi-launch rocket systems, with Lemur missiles, with regular artillery rounds, and the main purpose was to spin down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to send reinforcements in direction of the fields where the Russians were trying to advance. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the Ukrainian positions on the south of Ugledar with FPV drones. We're using this video just to geolocate, the current positions in this area. Also, very interesting updates are coming from Novomikhailivka and the area around Novomikhailivka. To tell the truth, currently there are very heavy clashes and the Russians are storming this area. The Ukrainian sources published significant number of videos, of geolocated videos of the Russian progress, of the Russian movements. On this video, we see the Russian engineering equipment that entered the minefields. There were explosions, but the Russian soldiers survived. They left they abandoned the damaged armored vehicles and returned back safe. The Ukrainians published lots of videos of FPV drone bombardments of the Russian forces in the fields. This icon I added softly because I don't know where exactly the Ukrainians were bombing, but the Ukrainian sources were saying that these bombardments from FPV drones took place exactly in the area of Novomikhailivka. Also, we got the video from the northern part of Novomikhailivka. The Russian tank was heading from the north, from Marinka to the south, Novomikhailivka, and the Ukrainians tried to slow down this tank using FPV drone. Maybe the Russians were continuing their demining process. Maybe they were trying to attack and support forces. Also, we got more videos from this area, but most of them wasn't geolocated, and I took a decision to keep them for better time. Maybe tomorrow Ukrainians will give us some coordinates and we will develop the story of the battle for Novomikhailivka. Anyway, one thing I know for sure, that obviously the Russians are storming this village, and maybe there are very high chances that the Russians have already entered some streets of this area, but for now we still haven't received any confirmation of that. The Ukrainians tried to support their forces with the air defense system, and Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian Tor system and to destroy it somewhere in the vicinity of Pobeda. So South Donetsk direction currently is the most active area, with Donetsk area, obviously. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on Donetsk direction, the South Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 70 soldiers. A lot of interesting updates are coming from Avdiivka area. The Russians continue advancing. And the sources are saying that the Russians during the previous, days managed to get as close as possible to the village by the name of Severne. So according to some Russian sources, this is the current progress and the current situation in this area. The Russians are right in front of this village, but the Russians still haven't launched any offensive operation because to cross the fields is too dangerous. First, they need to suppress the Ukrainians, and probably the next few days they're going to do exactly like this. Furthermore, some sources are saying that the Russians Russians continue advancing on the northern part of in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka, and that the Russians continue their movements in direction of Novokalinova. And today we got very interesting geolocation, how the Russian tank from the safe distance was trying to attack the Ukrainian forces along the railways. On this video we see that standalone Russian tank who was trying to bomb and attack the Ukrainian tree lines along the railways. So this is just the video to show that currently this area is secure. There is no problem for the Russians to move along these fields because the Ukrainians maybe are too far and maybe they don't have possibilities to attack, and the minefields were demined. Furthermore, we got updates that the Russians managed to clear completely the railways, the tree lines along the railways on the west of Krasnogorovka, and they are ready to continue further offensive operation in Stepova. Some speculators are saying that the Russians have already entered this village, but I don't think so. Also, interesting updates are coming from Avdiivka itself. The Russian sources published the video of like bombardments of these these bridges, and as you can see, I have updated the map. So as I understand, the Ukrainians haven't made any counter-offensives in this area to restore this position, but as I understand, the Russians took a decision to step back because of a very difficult process of supporting and supplying this territory. Also, we got another very interesting video. I have added the geolocation softly. The Russians start using new type of weapon in Avdiivka. Probably they're trying to test this weapon, and this weapon has the name of Motiv 3M. What does it mean? This is something like a guided bomb, but the thing is that this is a guided bomb, but these have some special equipment. So when you use guided bomb, you can give some equipment and to increase the distance of usage of this type of weapon. But guided bomb is not self-navigated, so it can fly very far. It can a little bit correct its destination, its the fly direction, but it's not self-navigated weapon. And the Russians created new type of bomb like Motiv 3M, and you can use this type of weapon with guided bombs, but during the fly this type of weapon can self-navigate itself. It can see using some special vision the territory to recognize targets, and then to let's say almost at the target it can change its direction and to attack the target exactly it needed. So very powerful weapon, very interesting type of weapon. As we can see, the Russians continue their improvements, and every single day the Ukrainians are getting in worse and worse situation. Very interesting video we got from Novokalinova and Novobakhmutovka direction. On this video we can see how the Ukrainian striker, as I understand, or Bradley, was heading to the south, and this type of weapon was destroyed as a result of strike of Lancet of new generation. So this is the third Lancet strike for the previous 24 hours. That was a very successful day for this type of weapon, and this is the first thing that we did note. And the second one is that Ukrainians currently try to concentrate their main forces not even in Avdiivka, but on the line Keramik, Novokalinova, Alexandropol. So this is the main area of concentration of Ukrainian forces. As I understand, while the Russians are trying to advance further in direction Berdychi-Stepova using this global direction, the Ukrainians will try very soon to attack the Russians in Novobakhmutovka. And if the Ukrainians are able to do this, obviously we understand that the Russian plan will be collapsed and the Russians will be forced to step back. This is the second attempt of Ukrainian forces to stop the Russians and to break their plans. The first attack, if you remember, the Ukrainians tried to make first attempt on the line of Pervomaiska-Peski, but the Ukrainians were defeated. The Russians managed to concentrate the operational reserves on this line, and the Ukrainians basically stopped without even making even attempt to attack. And now the Ukrainians took a decision to change direction, and they are trying to concentrate their forces on the northern flank. And the sources during the day were saying that the area in Gorlovka, New York agglomeration was very active the previous 24 hours, and the main reason of that is the Russian heavy bombardment of this area because the Russians see the Ukrainian movement. And as I understand, furthermore, the Ukrainians have some operational square in this area. When talking about Peski, everything is too small. The minefields, the cities, the rivers, water reservoirs too close to Donetsk. So there is no like area where the Ukrainians can be flexible. But when talking about northern direction, the Ukrainians can be pretty flexible in this area, and obviously they're going to try their luck and to attack Novobukhmatovka, Krasnogorovka from the north, trying to, let's say, break the Russian plans about Avdiivka new separation. Now we're moving to Bakhmut, Artyomov's direction, and we got another video of Lancet strike. On this video, we see how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian counter-artillery radar ANTPQ, probably as a result of Lancet strike. Another like very important and very expensive equipment was destroyed. When talking about Bakhmut, we also got a lot of updates. The Russians are trying to trick Ukrainians, and while the Ukrainians try to develop their positions in the vicinity of Andreevka, Zelenopolye, currently for the Ukrainians this is the main goal and the main purpose, to enter Zelenopolye and to enter Kurdyumovka and to force the Russians to step back from this side of the railways and to establish 100% control over the territory on the Ukrainian side of the railways that goes from Bakhmut to, let's say, Zaryanovka. And while the Ukrainians trying to do this, the Russians took a decision to launch their own offensive operation on the northern flank, so in the opposite position. And currently the Russians are trying to storm and establish control over this cloud, including the village by the name of Khromovo. And the Russians are doing this for one purpose: to force the Ukrainians to step back and to force the Ukrainians to send reserves to the north. Can't say whether the Russians managed to achieve this, but the thing is that if the Ukrainians are not going to stop on the south, the Russians will achieve results on the north. So the Ukrainians don't have chances, don't have any other options. They need to send reinforcement back to the north. And we got geolocated confirmation of Russian progress, that they captured new tree lines, but I'm not saying that this is like the Russian plan to force the Ukrainians to step back, to send reserves. The thing is that if telling the truth, the Russians have concentrated their forces on the north, on the line between, let's say, Dubovo, Vasilivka, Berhovka, Yagidna, Bakhmut. This is the Russian main concentration area, and they're trying to attack here. So this is the Russian plan, to force the Ukrainians to send reserves, to stop Ukrainian advance on the south, and if the Ukrainians are not going to do this, to capture some new tree lines and territories. The Ukrainians, to tell the truth, are doing the same. This is the main Ukrainian operational area. They try to concentrate forces in this area and continue attacking the Russian forces in direction of Kurdyumovka, Zelenopolye, in direction of Adradovka, and in direction of Oputna. So as you can see, both army attacks, the Russians from the north, the Ukrainians from the south. And it's the trick. If the Russians start losing on the south, if the Russians understand that they're losing, that they don't have enough of forces, the Russians will be forced to redeploy their reserves to the south, trying to stop the Ukrainian progress. And the Russians will lose their foothold and their progress on the north. From the other side, if the Ukrainians are defeated on the north, they will be forced to send the reserve from the south to the north, and they will lose their progress from the south. So basically, this is the battle of defenses. Whose defense is better, the Ukrainians on the north or the Russian on the south, is going to win the battle for Bakhmut. And this is the war of nervous, the war of probably of military experience and probably of spirit. And we're gonna follow this situation, because these two battles will determine the future and the last few months of 2023 in this direction. When talking about Kupyansk Lyman frontline, we have haven't received anything, just regular clashes and artilleries. The only important thing is that as a result of clashes on the Kupyansk and Lyman direction, the Ukrainians lost significant number of forces. On Kupyansk 160 soldiers, on Lyman 170 soldiers. The Russians, as you remember, during the previous days managed to develop their foothold on the south of Pershatravneva to get as close as possible to the main road that connects Orlyavka and Petropavlovka. The Russians managed to establish fire control over this territory, and the sources are saying that currently the Russians are trying to dig in deeper to prepare their positions, because they managed to advance a lot during the previous weeks, and in a week or in two the Russians will restart their offensive operation will continue further in direction of the next road N26 that connects Petropavlovsk and Kislovka-Kotlarovka. So the Russians have some progress in this area, and some sources right before I start making this video reported that the Russians also entered the northern part of Sinkovka. Probably for the previous 3 months, the Russians entered, according to sources, maybe third or fourth time in a row, the northern part of Sinkovka. So I'm not saying that this is speculation, but we need more details and we need at least some geolocations to agree with this piece of news. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes to my Patreon and have a good day. Bye bye.